I told him to go away. That's the part I have to live with. He came to say goodbye, and I looked at his face. His face in the steel door of my refrigerator, and I said, "Go away." I didn't know he was dying in a hospital bed 40 miles from my kitchen. I didn't know that in the same moment I was standing barefoot on a cold tile floor, startled and confused. His body was shutting down, room by room, like someone walking through a house turning off every light. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was that I saw him. And I told him to leave. He did, and 2 hours later, the phone rang. I need you to understand something before I go any further. I am not someone who sees things. I've never had a vision. Never had what people call a spiritual experience. Never paid much attention to stories like the ones I'm about to tell you. I'm a practical person. I fix what's broken. I don't sit with the unexplainable. I look for the circuit that failed and replace it. That's how I've always operated, which is exactly why what happened in my kitchen that afternoon cracked something open in me that has never fully closed. My friend, let's call him what he was, my oldest friend, the person who knew me better than anyone on this earth, had been in the hospital for 11 days. A cardiac event. He was 61. They had him stable, or so we thought. Recovering. The last time I spoke to him by phone, 3 days before, he told me he was tired, but okay. He said he was looking forward to getting home and watching a game together, like we used to. I said I'd bring the food. He laughed. I laughed. We said goodbye. Normal. Ordinary. The kind of goodbye you say 1,000 times in a friendship, because you always assume there will be 1,000 more. I was in my kitchen. Late afternoon. The winter light coming in low and sideways through the window. That particular gray-gold color it gets in November. I was moving around with no real purpose. Opening the refrigerator door, closing it, opening it again the way you do when you're not actually hungry, but you need something to do with your hands. And then I had the door half open, and I caught a reflection in the stainless steel panel on the front. A face. His face. Not a blur, not a trick of the light. His face. Clearly. The way you see someone standing close behind you in a mirror. He was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on him in all the years I'd known him. Not distress, not pain, something closer to tenderness. The kind of look you give someone when you already know something they don't. I startled backwards. My heart slammed. "Go away," I said, out loud, like a reflex. Like something I said to a shadow on a dark street. The reflection was gone. I stood there with my pulse in my throat, breathing, telling myself it was a trick of exhaustion, a smear on the steel, a face assembled by a tired brain from random shapes of light. I closed the refrigerator. I walked to the other room. I sat down. I made myself breathe slowly. I was fine for exactly 1 hour and 43 minutes. Then the phone rang. His wife's voice. 3 words before I even said hello. "He's gone, honey." The room tilted. I sat down on the floor, not because I chose to, but because my legs simply removed themselves from the decision. The cold tile, the low winter light. The phone pressed against my ear while she said other words I couldn't register, about a sudden decline, about the doctors, about peaceful, about not suffering. Peaceful. Not suffering. I kept hearing those words later and not being able to feel them, because what I felt, underneath the shock, underneath the grief, was something uglier than sadness. I felt guilt. I told him to go away. He came, apparently, to say goodbye, and I dismissed him. I startled at his face and sent him off with a word that I cannot take back, that I have turned over in my hands 1,000 times in the years since, wondering what it cost him to make that trip, whatever kind of trip that is, and what it meant to be greeted the way I greeted him. For a long time, that guilt was the whole story. That was all I had. The reflection, the dismissal, the phone call, the rearrangement of everything. But then, months later, something happened that changed what the story means. And I need to tell you about that too, because what I learned about where he was in that reflection and what he was trying to show me is the part that matters most. What does it mean to see someone in the moment of their death? And what were they actually trying to say? I found a grief support group. Not because I'm the type. Because I was drowning, and someone handed me a rope, and I grabbed it. In that group, there was a woman who had experienced something that researchers call a shared death experience, a phenomenon documented in clinical literature where someone at a distance perceives the moment of a loved one's passing through a vision, a sound, a presence, or an overwhelming emotional sensation. She helped me understand that what happened in my kitchen was not a malfunction. It was a transmission. And she said something that I've thought about almost every day since. She said, "The ones who visit at the end aren't suffering. They come because they're already free." I didn't know what to do with that then. I still wasn't sure I believed it, but I held on to it like you hold on to something in the dark. Not because you can see it clearly, but because it's the only solid thing your hand has found. And 6 months later, I had my own experience. Not a cardiac event, not a dramatic collapse. A surgery. Routine, they said, low risk. That went wrong in a way that surgeries sometimes do. A complication. A sudden drop. Monitors screaming. Hands moving fast. My surgeon later told me I was clinically unresponsive for slightly over 6 minutes. I don't remember the surgery going wrong. What I remember is a stillness so complete it had texture. Not darkness, not sleep. Something more like the space between one note and the next in a piece of music. Not absence, pause. And in that pause, there was no fear. No cold, no weight of anything I had ever carried. Every worry, every loss, every unanswered question I had been dragging through my life, all of it had simply been set down somewhere. I wasn't aware of it being taken. It was just gone. And what remained was a quiet so deep it felt like the original version of peace. The one that existed before anything ever hurt anyone. And then, the quiet opened. Not like a door, like a seam in a piece of fabric pulled gently apart. And what was on the other side was not a place I have the right vocabulary for. I will do my best. The light was not blinding. That's the first thing I want to correct about every image of this that I'd ever seen. It wasn't a tunnel rushing toward a white explosion. It was more like the quality of light in a forest, when the clouds break apart and the sun comes through the canopy. Warm, layered, arriving from multiple directions at once, as if the light itself had no single source, but was simply native to where I was. And where I was? This is the part I struggle to explain without it sounding like something I invented. Was the future. Not a metaphor, not symbolic. I was standing in what I understood with a certainty that required no explanation to be what this earth will look like after everything broken about it has been repaired. Not another planet, not a spiritual realm. This world. The same geography, hills, sky, water, but restored to a version of itself so far beyond what we currently have that the comparison is almost painful. Like showing someone a masterpiece and then asking them to look back at a rough sketch on a napkin. The grass had a color I don't have a word for, somewhere between the green of new spring and a gold that wasn't quite warm and wasn't quite cool. It moved in a wind that felt intentional, like it was placed there specifically to be beautiful. The sky was the kind of blue that makes you realize you've never actually seen blue before. Deep, layered, alive with a quality that made it feel less like atmosphere and more like presence. And the air. I keep coming back to the air. Each breath was not just oxygen. It was repair. Every time I breathed, something that had been crooked inside me straightened a millimeter. Then I heard something. Not voices first. Sound first. A sound like many people standing and beginning to move at once. A low, collective exhale, followed by the first sounds of shock and recognition and joy spreading outward in waves. Something was happening to the people all around me. People were waking up, not from ordinary sleep, from the long silence, from the deep, dreamless rest that follows when a life in this world ends. A rest without pain, without awareness of time passing, without the cruelty of knowing you're waiting. They were simply still. And then, in the same moment, all of them, no longer still. I watched an older man open his eyes and sit up slowly, and as he did, the stiffness, the years, the damage, all of it unwound from him like something being carefully unwrapped. By the time he was standing, he was 30 years younger. Not younger the way we mean when we say someone looks good for their age. Actually younger. The body that should have been his returned to him. He looked at his hands, turned them over, pressed them together, and then he looked up and across the field. His face transformed into something I cannot describe accurately because the human face doesn't normally move that way. It was not just happiness. It was the end of an ache that had lasted decades. He ran. The animals moved with him, not in the way I expected, not in a rush toward one specific person, but the way wildlife moves in a place where nothing is afraid. Dogs of every kind ran through the crowd with their whole bodies, tail, ears, entire posture, expressing something that needed no translation. They wove between people with an easy joy, circling, brushing against legs, rolling in the grass beside children who were laughing with the complete abandon that only children can manage. Horses moved along the far edge of the gathering, unhurried, magnificent, each one a different shade of impossible, and they bent their great heads toward people who reached out, and the contact was easy and natural, like a greeting between equals. Birds landed on outstretched arms. Everywhere you looked, the world of animals and the world of people existed in a relationship that had no fear in it, from either direction. Nothing hunted, nothing fled. The whole creation celebrating the same moment. And the children. I have to stop here for a moment, because I don't know how to write this part without it sounding insufficient. There were mothers running with a single-minded directness I have never seen on a human face outside of emergency. But this was not emergency. This was the opposite of emergency. This was arrival. Women who had carried losses so private, so isolating, so invisible to everyone around them. The children they never got to hold, the lives that ended before they began. Running toward small figures who were waking up, whole and radiant, and completely unreservedly alive. And the moment of contact. Arms finally closing around what had been missing for years, for decades. That moment made no sound at first. It was too large for sound, and then it broke open into something that was laugh and sob and gasp all at once, and I understood that I was watching the specific repair of the specific grief that doesn't have a name in our language. And then I saw him, my friend, my oldest friend, standing at a slight distance from the crowd, with his hands in the pockets of a jacket I recognized. The worn corduroy one he always wore to our games, the one he said he'd never throw away, because he'd had it since his 30s. He was standing in it now, but he was not an old man in an old jacket. He looked the way he had looked when we met. Strong, easy in his body, his face. That face I'd seen in the reflection on the steel door of my refrigerator, wearing the same expression it had worn then. Tender, knowing, waiting. He looked at me with no surprise, as if he'd known I would be here, in this moment, looking at him from exactly this distance. And he smiled. Not the smile of someone who needs to explain himself, the smile of someone whose point has been made. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. What I understood in that moment, and I use understood because it wasn't told to me, it settled into me like something that had always been true, was that when he came to my kitchen, he was not asking for help. He was not frightened. He was not in pain. He was already this, already free, already in the first breath of what I was now witnessing. He came to my kitchen from a place of freedom, not distress. And what he carried in that reflection was not goodbye. It was a preview. He was showing me this. He was standing at the edge of everything that was about to be made right, and he turned back one last time, not because he was afraid to go forward, but because he wanted me to know the direction. He wanted me to see the address, even if I wasn't ready to arrive yet. And I told him to go away. He smiled again, and I understood that too. That the word didn't land the way I feared it had. That where he was, the weight of a startled, frightened, confused response from someone who didn't yet understand, it didn't diminish anything. It couldn't touch what he had already stepped into. And then the seam closed. I came back the way you come back from something you weren't supposed to survive. Badly. The air in the recovery room felt thick, almost solid, after what I had been breathing. The light was fluorescent and merciless. Every joint announced itself at once. A nurse was saying something close to my ear. The heart monitor drew its steady line. I was, apparently, alive. I lay there for a long time before I said anything. When the surgeon came to check on me, he asked how I was feeling. I looked at him and I said, "Did you know that the first thing I'm going to do when I get out of here is go buy that jacket I never bought?" He had no idea what I meant. But I did. What I know now, what that long, quiet 6 minutes gave me, is that I was wrong about the reflection. I was wrong about what it meant to see his face in that steel door. And I was wrong about the word I said to it. He wasn't coming to me out of need. He was already, in whatever way that crossing works, at the edge of the morning I was eventually allowed to see. The sleep that comes at the end of this life has no suffering in it. It has no weight, no duration, no cold floor to lie on. The people we have loved who are no longer here are not somewhere in between, not waiting in anguish, not diminished. They are in a rest so complete it has no texture. And the next thing they will know, the absolute next moment of their awareness, is that same field, that same light. Those same faces running toward them. The gap between now and then, for them, does not exist. It is the thickness of a page, which means that what matters, the only thing that truly matters, is what we do on this side of the page. Not the rituals, not the labels, the direction of your heart. Whether you are genuinely turning toward the one who designed that morning, or whether you are too busy, or too armored, or too proud to look. Every honest step in that direction, every moment of choosing to live with your eyes on what is actually real, it accumulates. It is the letter you are writing with your choices, sent ahead to the person you will be when that field opens. My friend came to show me the address. I finally know how to use it. If someone you've lost came to mind while you were listening to this, you are exactly who this channel was made for. Subscribe. There's more waiting for you here. And one more thing. When you finish the video, check the pinned comment. I left something there for you. Tell me in the comments, who is the first person you want to find in that field? And what's the first thing you'd say? You didn't end up here by accident. Subscribe, and every week I'll bring you another story that reminds you that hope is still real. And don't forget, I left something special in the pinned comment, just for you.